Hello, thanks for joining me. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the minor but profound markings that can come and go on the Jupiter finger, the tip of the index finger. The Jupiter finger is all about leadership and authority, decision making, judgment, ego and ambition, spirituality and religion as well. The tip of the fingers is more to do with higher purpose and how we receive and respond to the higher information all around us. So this is much more to do with ego and religion and spirituality, morality as well, how we view the self. It's the finger of the self and how we see ourselves. Self-worth and confidence is also seen in this finger. So the first one I'll be looking at here is the one straight deep vertical line in the tip of the index finger. And this shows us a deep sense of morality, spirituality, a very religious person. It's a very positive sign because it shows someone who is highly morally sort of motivated and they exuberate this high spiritual morality in everything that they do. And in this way, they lead by example. People with this sign lead active spiritual and religious lives, and as I say, they have a high sense of a great sense of right and wrong. They are often very upstanding, decent people, and that's how others see them as well. So the next sign I'll be looking at here is the cross on the tip of the index finger. And, it's very similar to this first sign. It's very positive spiritually, religiously, but there's a disturbance that cuts through this, an obstacle that cuts through this high moral, religious kind of spiritual nature. So essentially, there's an obstacle here. There's something cutting through this development of spirituality and understanding of this kind of moral, religious way of thinking. Something's getting in the way of this development. It could be a sign that something's getting in the way of this, the correct way of thinking. It's corrupting in some way this morality, this sense of religion. Something is disturbing, and it can create sort of fantasies, unrealistic thoughts. It can skew the correct sort of way of spiritual, sort of moral thinking. To provide an example, could become too involved in something that's very superstitious and have negative impacts on those around them. So, in the same way that a single line affects others, um, that in the way that they carry out their work, they have an influence on others. This too could also have an influence on others, but not in such a positive way. Their superstitions could become contagious. The next sign I'll be looking at is the star. A star doesn't have to have 5 points. It can have five or more to be a star. Often we see a six-pointed stars as well. For it to truly be a star, it has to be sort of isolated from other lines. It can't be sort of connected to other lines. It doesn't quite qualify as a star, and it will have some sort of profound meaning, but it won't be quite as powerful a marking. It has to have 5 points or more to be a star. Now, this star is a very profound and powerful marking. And I myself have seen this marking come and go within the space of 3 days, a deep and indented five-pointed star. And this star, it represents us. Stars are always sudden. They are always involved, impact great change somehow in a person's life. And now, remember, the tip of Jupiter is changing how we feel and think about ourselves. It's a higher kind of sense of the self. The star here represents a huge and sudden increase in either mental or financial well-being, sometimes even both. And as I say, I have actually seen this sign myself appear and come and go within the space of 3 days, and it lived up to what it represents. It represents tremendous importance to the individual and will make a great positive change to their life and improve their way of feeling and thinking about themselves as well and how they view themselves in the world. The next sign we'll be looking at here is the triangle on the tip of Jupiter, and I find triangles fascinating because they're always fortunate signs, and they in this respect represent an aptitude for uh, the occult, for highly spiritual or magical, theological, religious, or metaphysical studies. through a study of this kind of science or religious spiritual way of thinking study, they will in some way become fortunate, and that not isn't necessarily material. I mean, they will prosper uh, in terms of how they view themselves in the universe, and also likely gain a great sense of self-worth in doing this as well, and improve their sense of right and wrong as well, and how they fit in the world. People who have this marking are often drawn to um, occult sciences and religious studies, spiritual practices. They might well find themselves reading about certain sort of rituals in certain societies and cultures without realizing it. They're drawn to these things. And it's likely that a person with this marking will become so drawn to a particular type of spiritual or religious study that they end up devoting their life to it. And as I say, it's a very fortunate sign. So they may well create a living out of this kind of study and improve the lives of others through doing this. The next sign here I'll be looking at is the square on the tip of Jupiter, the first phalanx of Jupiter. Now, squares are protective markings. In Tibetan palmistry, they're known as a safe place to land, the marking of poi. And squares are always positive. They're protective. In some way, they show a need to protect. So I suppose that's not good. But here I've drawn three squares, and that is because if you look very closely, you can actually see three neat squares all sort of connected to each other, very faint. But this one in particular is at its strongest, and there is another one here as well. A square in this area of the palm represents protection from spiritual practices, from magic, from extremist religious practices or rituals. It in some way indicates a person is involved in magic or the occults or some sort of religious study, but there is protection against the extremist and possibly negative effects of this kind of practice or study. This particular area of the palm can show indications of potential, dangerous visions, fantasies. And so this can provide some sort of protection against that, some measured approach towards how we um, engage with this kind of study or practice in something that's potentially quite sort of harmful. So what this is doing is is providing balance, protection, and a very measured approach. They might well be fearful of what they are discovering in some way, or what others are practicing, but this offers protection and balance. Circles in palmistry are a funny sign because they're very uncommon. They're very rare, in fact. It's not something that the palm is particularly common to show, unless it's a bit different when it's a skin ridge pattern like a whorl. That's different. But the lines forming an actual circle is very rare. I don't see it very often at all. And actually, most of the time, circles are very ominous. But in this case, it's quite a positive sign. I'm not completely convinced. I know a great deal about what this means, but I will try. The circle provides a great sort of conviction in religious thinking and feeling, and provides its owner with a great sense that uh, their faith will see them through. And somehow it's true for that person, whoever it might be. It manages them to get them out of danger, out of trouble, and their conviction is in some way so influential that it in itself their belief in their faith is actually what supports them and manages them enables them to succeed. People with this very rare marking are highly intelligent, critical, and highly understanding, but they are people of a very powerful faith. Think in this case, oddly, the circle is another sort of form of protection, really. It doesn't allow outside thoughts to get in. I imagine someone with this sign is highly individual in their conviction. Nothing can change their way of thinking. Nothing can tempt them. Now, this next sign, I'll be looking at the island in the tip of the Jupiter finger. Islands are not good signs in palmistry. It's very rare that they are good signs, and it's a disturbance of the flow of energy. It's a disruption. It generally represents a kind of sluggish blockage to energy. It creates a kind of um, unfavorable way of thinking in terms of spirituality, morality, and religion. It, in some ways, sort of corrupts the way of thinking. So much so, the owner may well undertake some sort of likely knowing full well that this is, what they should not be doing. They are immoral. This marking has a moral significance about it. The last sign I'm going to go over here is the Grille sign, and it's not a good sign. It's potentially the worst sign to see on the tip of the Jupiter finger. When I say the Grille, I mean this kind of cross-hatching of lines, creating a grid-like formation, and it shows that the energies are disrupted in such a way that it prevents the owner from um, correct moral and spiritual practices. So they might have their own way of their own very negative or uncorrect or corrupted view of how things should be. They are extremists potentially. They are zealots and not necessarily practicing in a way that's, well, they're likely practicing in a way that's harmful towards others. They are convicted in that what they are doing is the right way. However, it is potentially very harmful. I don't expect this sign to be something that you would see all that often. It's the sort of sign that you would see in a cult leader who wouldn't hesitate in persecuting someone that might threaten their position of authority or the way they're seen in their religious community. They don't have much of um, a moral compass in terms of how they carry out their deeds. And such a person might well be quite willing actually to break the law in order to, they're just so fixated on their view and what should be done and how it should be carried out that they're quite happy to spend time in prison. Quite often, these people have such strongly opinionated view of how life should be that they live in a retreat somewhere, isolate themselves, and try to sort of recruit others slowly to back their own way of thinking. So I will just say that although what I've said about these signs seems quite definite, it's important in palmistry never to diagnose from one sign alone in the palms. It's quite rare that you can do that. And these signs, these markings are known as minor markings, but they do have significant effects. And quite often these are the kinds of signs that you can sort of rely on a bit more for accurate conclusions. Although I don't subscribe to the idea of just concluding from one sign or alone in the palms. But often when I see something, I then look for evidence to corroborate that detail. So it's extremely important in palmistry, if you're reading someone's palm, to always support them. Use palmistry as guidance, as a healing practice. That's what it's for, to first do no harm, as Hippocrates himself said. And it's Hippocrates from which we take his oath, from doctors take his oath. And it's important to note that Hippocrates himself was a palmist. Thank you for watching this video on the minor but powerful markings on the tip of the index or Jupiter finger. Let me know what your thoughts are, and thank you. Please subscribe.